Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. So, Trump unleashed a quote-unquote dramatic tax cut plan. Now, the fact that a Republican is releasing a tax cut plan is not all that interesting, to be honest. Republicans and tax cuts are like, a hungry person looking for a sandwich. Ultimately, it's what they're there for. Lower my taxes. I don't care if you have to hurt somebody else. Lower my taxes. That's not the part that's interesting to me. And I'm going to put a link to the Washington Post article that talks about it. The part that's interesting to me is the thing I want to notify you to look out for. Their reasoning. Because understand, they can't come out and say, well, we want to lower these taxes for the people with the wealthiest people in this country. They can't say that. That wouldn't go over well. So they would come up with these arguments, like trickle-down economics. Recently, with the job market being the way it is, the argument that you would hear often actually is, we're doing this so you can get more jobs. I've made this argument multiple times before, and it's rather important because it's persistent. It's one of those things in politics that's it's for the most part, it's pretty accurate in describing the behavior of politicians. The arguments that a politician gives you, that doesn't necessarily mean there's substance to the argument. Oftentimes, the argument is purely there to get them from point A to point B. So in this case, yes, I have $1 billion in the bank, but god damn it, I need more. I need more tax cuts. How do I get those people to vote for somebody who's going to okay giving me an additional $2, $3, $4 million for that particular year? I know there's a shortage of jobs. The economy is not doing well. People are getting hurt by this particular economic situation. Let's pretend that what we're doing is going to give them jobs. And if those people who are already desperate and who for the most part are barely making ends meet, as is, if those people full well believe the lie, if they buy into the scam, that giving these guys a tax cuts, even though they're already making billions of dollars, if they buy into that scam based upon their own level of desperation, we can exploit that desperation and we can get our tax cuts. And those people will be none the wiser, thinking that who they put in that office, who they put their vote down for, who they argued for, was somehow helping them out. It's not. It's not. The argument is purely there for the sake of argument. It's just, the argument is no more valid than trickle-down economics was valid. The catch is, if Trump is going to give a massive tax cut to the people who need it the least, those people are not going to take that money to invest in jobs. There's no reason for them to do that. Put yourself in the position of a capitalist, an entrepreneur, somebody who started a business and that business is for the most part going gangbusters. You're making X amount a year. Now, you get a tax cut. Now, you can do a few things with that money, but you have everybody that you need on your staff. Are you just going to willy-nilly hire somebody, not because you need them, but because you got a tax cut? No. People are hired only when they're necessary. The reason this is a capitalistic society, the point is to maximize profit. You don't maximize profit by just throwing it away on workers willy-nilly. You're bringing on a worker because you need that worker to do a particular task that's going to make you more money. The person that you hire is purely related to the revenue that you can exploit from that particular person working for you. These guys getting all this money, that's not going to go into taxes. That's not going to go into workers. That's going to go into their pocket. It may go into the stock market. Ultimately, this argument, the reason why they're conflating work and taxes is to get you to believe that for some reason, giving these people more money is going to inevitably, in some particular way, this magical thinking that it's going to trickle down to the unwashed masses. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. Income inequality is absurd right now. If income inequality allowed some particular way for that money to trickle down, wouldn't have happened at this point. When did Reagan get out of office? What, the 80s? Or he started in the 80s? It doesn't look like it's trickling down. Not only does it not look like it's trickling down, it looks like it's going up faster. When 95% of the gains went to the top 1%. That doesn't look like trickle down to me. That doesn't look like trickle down to me at all. So this is the article. President Trump on Wednesday proposed a dramatic overhaul of the tax code, calling for sharper, lower taxes for individuals and businesses, but also for eliminating key tax breaks. We have a once-in-a-lifetime or once-in-a-generation opportunity to do something big and important on taxes, White House National Counsel Director Gary Cohen said on Wednesday. The White House officials are ambitious, but the path to overhauling the tax code is riddled with political landmines. Many budget experts say they believe the White House plan would reduce federal revenue by so much that it would grow debt by trillions of dollars in the next decade, growing interest costs and slowing down the economy. That's important. You need to understand, tax cuts aren't free. If you're giving somebody a tax cut, that's revenue that you're no longer getting for the operations of the U.S. government. So if you're somebody who's already has billions of dollars, you're paying a particular politician to lower your taxes further so you can get more of that particular money. That money has to come from somewhere. And not just has to come from somewhere, the money has to be made up by someone. The person who makes up that money when Trump gives his billionaires a tax cut is you. It's you. The amount of money that corporations used to pay for taxes was, if I'm not mistaken, 25% at one point. I think right now it's down to 10%. Meaning you, me, family, just everybody else, the average person in this particular class has to make up the slack for the Plutocrats when Trump gives these guys their tax cuts. That's what it boils down to. Let's keep going. The central feature of the White House plan would be a big reduction in tax rates for virtually all Americans and businesses. It would eliminate the 7 existing income tax brackets and replace them with 3 brackets containing new rates of 10%, 25%, and 35% based on someone's income. White House officials haven't specified which income levels will hit the higher tax brackets, as they are part of the ongoing discussions with Capitol Hill. And look, some of this does hit just regular people. It does hit regular people. But understand, if you're giving me a 10% tax cut, that's a hell of a big difference between me getting a 10% tax cut and somebody who has $1 billion in the bank, a 10% tax cut. Some of these tax cuts go up into the tens and 20s of millions of dollars. For the plutocrats, the average person may see a little bit of change back. But understand, the reason they're doing this is not for you. They're doing this for them. They're trying to find a reason to convince you that what they're doing for them is somehow benefiting you. It is not. It is not. You're not getting additional jobs just because they're getting money to put in their pocket. There's another feature of this. He's trying to have a tax holiday, essentially a repatriation. What that means is there are certain people who didn't want to pay taxes in this country. They wanted to use the services of this country. They wanted to use the electricity, the police, the fire department. They wanted to use the workers of this particular country. They wanted to use the resources of the country. But they didn't want to pay for those things. They wanted to be lazy freeloaders. And they wanted to hide the money that they earned off of all of this exploited labor. Hide it overseas somewhere where the United States government could not get any of the tax money. Now, what a tax holiday says, and Republicans love these, and Democrats do too, they would say, well look, instead of paying the typical rate of tax that everybody else pays, that every other regular American pays, instead of paying that tax rate, you can give us 5%. You can give us 3%. Hey, you can give us 2%. It's your lucky goddamn day. And you can bring that money back into the country. The repatriation of that cash is essentially just a massive tax cut off of capital that people had hid out the country. Now, illegal aliens, people who come into this country illegally, Republicans will say, well, those people need to get in line. They were breaking the law. We don't want them to find a process for legal immigration at that point. Dodging taxes is also breaking the law. That's also breaking the law. Those people who are bringing the money back into the country are criminals at this point. And yet, you're willing to give those criminals a massive tax break even though they were breaking the law by hiding that money outside the country. That's amazing to me. That's amazing to me. So ultimately, you're saying you're incentivizing them to do that particular behavior. Hey, at some point, a Democrat or Republican who I'm paying off is going to give me a tax holiday. So yes, I can hide my money outside this country like I've been doing for the past X number of years. Because ultimately, at some point, somebody is going to see it my way and they're going to give me a tax holiday, and I will be able to bring that money back into the country. And instead of paying 20%, 25% tax, I'll be able to pay 5, 4, or 3% tax. Yeah, you can tell I'm not in favor of tax holidays. You're the federal government. You're the federal government. You need to be a little bit more hard-ass with plutocrats who are trying to cheat you. You would willingly destroy the lives of people left and right over taxes. Just regular people. These people are literally hiding their money overseas. And the response is, we're going to give you a tax break so you can bring that money back into the country. That's absurd. That's absurd. If it's one of those things where somebody's hiding their money overseas, maybe you need to beef up that particular organization that goes after those guys. Not give these guys a break. And not. It's not even a slap on the wrist. It's almost like it's a moral hazard of sorts. They take a behavior. That behavior deprives the U.S. government of X amount of dollars in tax. Illegal behavior, at that deprives the U.S. government of X amount of dollars in tax. A Republican comes in. Somebody, whether it's a Republican or a Democrat, essentially the people who are paying these particular politicians, gets in office. That politician says, hey, I have this idea. We're going to have a tax holiday. That way we can get those people to bring those taxes back into this country. And they can take that money and then they can make jobs and all this other stuff. Now, the jobs thing is bogus because people don't necessarily make jobs unless they actually specifically need a particular position filled. They don't make jobs willy-nilly. Employees are expensive. So ultimately, that money is coming back in and they're putting that money in their pocket. Or they're giving out some kind of benefits. That money isn't coming to the rest of us. Ultimately, that benefit, that tax break that they're getting for bringing the money into the country, for acting illegally, only goes to them. And I suspect the people who are donating to these political campaigns. Or the politicians themselves receiving the money from the donations to their political campaigns. This repatriation thing is absurd. Nobody else gets this benefit. If you are in a situation, do you know you would probably be locked up if you call the federal government and say, hey, I'm going to keep my money overseas. Or, I'll make a deal with you. I'll just pay you 5% on this particular tax debt. The idea that the amount of money you have can determine whether or not the federal government, how it behaves towards you, meaning how harsh it is towards you, it's absurd. It's absurd. And the idea that this moral hazard, for the most part, is allowed to persist itself. Other presidents have done tax holidays. If I'm not mistaken, even Obama did a tax holiday. These things, it's insane. Yeah. For businesses, Trump's proposal would lower the corporate tax rate from 35% to 15%, and it would allow smaller businesses structured in such a way as they are affected by the individual rate to also use 15% threshold. There are millions of these businesses known as S-corporations, and they are often small and family-owned, but they can also include large law firms and lobbying shops. Now, here's another thing. They're trying to scrap the alternative tax. Trump is subjected to the alternative tax. So think of it this way. You do your taxes. Your taxes, based on deductions and everything else, comes up to a particular rate. Then you do another set of taxes. That alternative rate, or that secondary rate, you end up paying the highest of those two rates. They're trying to get rid of that particular rate because that rate can be higher than the other rate. So imagine a situation where your taxes are, oh, I only have to pay $3 million. You do the other one, it says you have to pay $30 million. Well, you may not like that $30 million one either. For whatever reason, that $30 million one, that alternative tax, is giving a number that's more representative of what you are actually earning in relation to everyone else. They hate that number. and they're trying to nix that particular tax. Yeah, again, ultimately, they're going to put a massive hole in the budget to give these people their taxes. That massive hole is going to have to be made up of someone. That someone is us. That's what it boils down to. When Republicans are draining the beast, or essentially trying to drain government of resources, it has to get that money from somehow. Either it's going to cut services, meaning Social Security, Medicare, education, etc., etc., or it needs to raise that money. Tax cuts don't raise money. Tax cuts essentially create budget deficits. This is going to be a massive budget deficit. That's what we're looking at. But again, this is nothing special. It's a Republican. Of course, a Republican is going to do it. The only thing I really want to focus here for this particular article is to pay attention to the argument that people are using when they're trying to convince you of something. The argument is important. Oftentimes, if there's some level of self-interest involved, you have to evaluate whether or not that self-interest is affecting what they're saying. In this particular case, do you believe that the Republicans, who are paid by people to lower their taxes, do you think they're motivated to lower those people's taxes? And in being motivated to lower those people's taxes, what do you think, if you had to make an argument to your constituents, to people who are voting for you, there's only 1% of the population at this point, if we're talking about the top 1%, just by definition. That means 99% of the other people are in a completely different class. Completely different class. Now, the argument that you need to make is to that people of that particular class, because those are the people who are voting for you. Those are people who are going to be angry if you do something that those people don't like. So what is an argument? Conceptually, what is a logical argument that you yourself, if you needed to come up with a reason to get those people, to give these plutocrats, these robber barons, if you needed a reason to give billionaires more, wouldn't the logical argument be, hey, when that money comes in, they're going to make jobs. And so you're going to get really decent jobs for all of this gobs of money that we give those people who, for the most part, money they don't need. It's a bullshit argument. It's a bullshit argument. It's done. That argument is only there to scam people into thinking that this is a good idea. There's no reality to the argument at all. Businesses don't function that way. An employee is expensive. An employee is expensive. The reason why they eliminate jobs now, the reason why they automate, the reason why they ship jobs overseas, they would prefer to accrue that profit to themselves. The act, whatever they're doing in that particular business, is a pain in the ass. They want profit. The stupid human trait that's involved in getting them that profit is just a means to an end. What I'm getting at is, they're not going to take that money and just buy an employee, because that's not the point. The point is to maximize profit. They're going to put that money in their pocket. They're going to put that money in dividends. They're going to put that money in maybe even the stock market. And it's not going to be in an exercise that would waste that particular money, at least waste it from the perspective of that particular business or that particular person. My point is, they're not going to hire a worker if they don't specifically need a worker. It doesn't work that way. They hire them when they need them. Otherwise, they're expensive. If that worker cannot essentially make up the money for his hiring, meaning whatever he's doing, he has to be able to produce more, a surplus. That's the only way the business recoups that money back. So, if that particular worker can't produce a surplus, they're not going to hire him. Now, no, he's not going to produce a surplus if they don't need him to produce a surplus. They're not hiring workers just for the sake of hiring workers. They hire them because they need those people to do a specific task. Those businesses, if they needed somebody to do a specific task, they have the money already that they would have paid for those people to do that task. Those businesses are not hurting. They're not broke. Ultimately, when that money comes back in, that money's going in their pockets. Money's going in their pockets. So, alright guys, if you enjoy the content, feel free to write, subscribe, and you can always support the work through Patreon.